Welcome to the conversation in News Central Television. This is the program where we bring you up to speed with all the political happenings on the African continent. On the program today, we will be discussing the concerns over Kenya's offer to dispatch police to Haiti to curb gang violence in the country. Later on the show, we will switch gears to developments in Niger, where despite an ECOWAS threat of military intervention to re-establish stability, there has been no noticeable action. We'll start off with the news from Niger, starting with unfolding events in the country that have captured the attention of world leaders, especially the ECOWAS and the African Union, whom are closely monitoring the aftermath of a military coup. Now, despite the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS is issuing a threat of military intervention unless the detained President Mohamed Bazoum is released and democratic governance is restored. There's been no evident action taken thus far. This response has brought to light divisions with the alliance as some member states stand with the military-led government while others advocate for intervention to re-establish stability. The current crisis in Niger poses a formidable challenge to ECOWAS, putting its capacity to effectively address complex regional issues to the test. With tensions escalating, the role and efficacy of ECOWAS in the future remains uncertain, highlights the intricate and nuanced dynamics prevailing in West Africa. Now, joining me this evening on the program to discuss this is Ambassador Amien Roy Ohidebe, the National Secretary, retired members of Nigerian Armed Forces, joins us from Lagos, Nigeria. Ambassador Roy, a warm welcome to you and thanks for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you very much. It's always an opportunity and a privilege.
We're happy to have you, Ambassador Roy. Now, what specific factors, Ambassador Roy, do you think have led to divisions among ECOWAS member countries in their response to the Niger coup, and how do historical, political, and regional influences contribute to this differing approaches?
Well, thank you very much. You see, one thing is certain, there is a constant in all of these situations that we have seen. You see, the presentation of African presidents as members of ECOWAS and AU and their personal attendance to all of the meetings and the resolutions, it's a grieving point for so many agitators for freedom from the West, freedom from international oppression of Africans. You know, so we have seen a situation where the Africans are now looking at their leaders as being oppressive and being used for and by oppressors, and also being selfish to leave office, to abide by democratic tenets. You know, and this has really broken the hearts of so many Africans that they have lost favor and interest in the kind of democracy that we run in Africa. And I am sure that so many other African countries are also going to toe the same line until we begin to look at some certain permutations that will bring sanity to the whole brouhaha.
About 8 days ago, ECOWAS did issue an ultimatum for the junta in Niger to restore power to the democratically elected President Mohamed Bazoum. Now, what challenges do you think have impeded the anticipated ECOWAS military intervention in Niger? That ultimatum expired yesterday, and they refused to launch any attacks. So was it an empty threat? And why do you think ECOWAS didn't make do of their threat?
Well, it was not an empty threat. You know, it was not. But I am sure that you look at the precedents. We just had an election. After the election, there is a tribunal sitting. During and currently, tribunal have not closed up and released their resolutions, their conclusions. Then we are looking at ministers We are doing screening and rescreening. We are removing and adding ministers. Then we ran into the subsidy and all the backlash on the people who are the masses, you know. Then we are looking at also putting the cases together for the former CBN governor, for the EFCC, the DSS. We are trying to also control hierarchy and command in the military because we just instituted a new command and control in the defense and the military. Now, all of this is going on. Then all of a sudden, we just had that our president currently, subject to tribunal conclusion, is now made the ECOWAS head. And in that melee of, oh, we are recognized now, then boom, there's ongoing in Niger Republic. And you know, what's going on there is also what is existing in other West African countries. Those same countries were suspended from ECOWAS. They were not attacked. They were not, military was not sent into their territorial integrity. You know, so all of those countries have now formed a kind of group and catchment for Niger. And those that are supposed to stand for ECOWAS right now, they are silent. And simultaneously, Russia and other countries that have interest in Africa are also towing the line of support for the junta. So you see where the quagmire lies. It means that we were supposed to have used the prerogative of having other people committing the same offense against ECOWAS laws, against Africa, to say, oh, we don't want a coup, and say, okay, we're going to deal with all of you together. Let's have a conversation. While you are putting your house in order. Right now, the house is not in order, and that issue is popping up its head. So it's a dicey situation.
Now, Ambassador Roy, if you did follow events yesterday in the Nigerian capital, Niamey, you would notice that there was a packed stadium. So many Nigerians came out in solidarity and support of the junta. So does ECOWAS consider what the people in those countries really want? It was actually that the stadium was packed to the rafters, and they were, I mean, we saw Russian flags. The people were in support of the military government in Niger. So does that factor into ECOWAS's decisions of potential military intervention and their sanctions if the people that matter, the Nigerian people, feel, you know, these guys are welcome?
The question I will even like to ask ECOWAS is, what are the dynamics of change over time in the reasons why the ECOWAS constitution was put up? What reviews have been done on that document that we hold as ECOWAS? Who constituted that document? And what interface of arguments from the people has also contributed to a review of the document before subsequent applications. Now, we have seen a lot of African presidents abuse democracy itself. We have seen elections that have been abused. We have seen abuse of office. Even in Nigeria, we have had a military regime taken from the civilians and another military regime take from the military. And there was no external aggression against us. And until we got to a stage where we now gave audience, and now we now have an interim government, and we now had an election. You know, so we went through our own processes by ourselves. So if we want to use that prerogative to say we are ECOWAS, we must insist, yes, for the document that is ECOWAS. When last has it been reviewed to meet the dynamics of current day society? The people that are the citizens of the component country states in ECOWAS, what do they want? Are they comfortable with the current situation? Are they okay as the foreign bodies, foreign previous rulers of the country? Are they okay that they take a percentage from their income? Are they okay that their resources are taken out to these countries, refined and brought back for their own economic downturn? Nigeria does not even have one refinery, one. So these things are looking at us in the face, and we need to look at that document called ECOWAS. We need to look at the document called AU, and we need to begin to speak from the perspectives of the people and the reality of our currency.
So, while the X-ray is still in ECOWAS, there's some observers that believe, the external actors that are pulling the strings behind ECOWAS. They mention the United States and France. They say they exert influence over ECOWAS's decisions. What do you make of this, and how much of an influence do you think this Western powers have over the ongoing situation in Niger and its potential impact on regional stability? Or is this a purely ECOWAS and Nigerian situation?
My perception from that angle is this. We have Africans, Nigerians, Kenyans, all of the African countries, we have them in the United States of America holding strong positions. We have even had a president, an African. We have Africans in the EU, in the European Union, in Britain. We have Africans holding strong positions in medical, in military, in technology, in aeroscience. We have Africans holding positions. We have Africans in their legislative bodies. So why would we agree that the influence from those people is what is making us dilapidated, is what is destroying our opportunities to give ourselves a better governance, a better way of life? It's not so. Our opportunity to utilize all our God-given mineral resources, it's not so. The problem is in us. Our way of life, our thinking, our lifestyle, we are selfish naturally. So we always think of ourselves. We agree to follow with an outsider, to be a mole in the inside. So all these arguments about the West is destroying Africa. Africans are within the content of the West destruction. Africans are taking the lead. African leaders do not stand and say, no, we do not. So we cannot begin to have that discussion now. Whatever America is coming to do, EU, Russia, we have Africans in their teams. We have Africans in their countries, in leadership, also contributing to the communication of whatever they are doing with us. So let's keep that aside. Let's look inward. Let's look at West African countries that are saying, no, we are with Niger. Let's look at West African countries that are saying, no, we are with ECOWAS. Who is ready to stand by what the people want, not what the leaders want?
Now, Ambassador Roy, the deadline expired yesterday. The military junta in Niger is still defiant, and they've gone ahead to terminate the defense contract with the security cooperation agreement with France, and they've closed their airspace, the entire airspace for the Republic of Niger. Now, ECOWAS did this. They threatened military intervention to, send signals that military coups will not be tolerated in the West Africa sub-region so as not to have a contagion effect. But they've refused to carry out their threat. The ECOWAS heads of states will be meeting in Abuja on Thursday. What do you anticipate will come out of that meeting? And how can they save face if they don't interfere militarily? Because the general opinion is that, you're going to make things worse. The people are okay with the government there. So why go and why choose the option of violence? So how do you think this will play out? How does ECOWAS save its face and at the same time protect its reputation and interest?
Well, the decision by the Senate to restrict the instruction of the president and refuse our military to take up arms was a rescue situation, and it was a rescue situation for our president because his table is full. I've just listed an array of issues, major issues concerning ministers, enthronement, military generals, deployment, SAC, and everything. So he's taking that decision was a hasty. And I'm happy that we got the Senate to just come and do a rescue. Now, for the leaders that are coming to meet, the African leaders, standing as ECOWAS right now, the question to them is, what was done before Nigeria had President Tinubu as a president? What was done for the other African countries that are also running a junta as a government? You suspended them. So I would have expected that you would say, okay, Niger Republic suspended also. Then you sit down. When you make President Tinubu the head of the ECOWAS, he will now call together all the suspended heads of junta and say, hey, I was not here when all of these things were happening, but I'm here now. Can we talk? And they must have a say on who you are bringing as a mediator. They must have a say. They must have a choice of credible Africans that we sit and create a narrative that we begin to interrogate the document called ECOWAS and create a better way for us to interface with the international world.
Ambassador Roy, I'd like to bring in our second guest into the discussion. His name is Salahuddin Hashim. He's a security and conflict expert. He joins us from the nation's capital, Abuja. One welcome to you, Salahuddin. Can you kindly unmute your device, sir? Now, Salahuddin, the expiration for the junta to restore to constitutional order expired yesterday. What is your assessment of the current situation? As we speak, the government in Niger is very defiant. They've cancelled their military cooperation agreement with France and they've shut down their airspace. So what would be the next step for ECOWAS? Is military intervention still a possibility?
Thank you very much for having me. I think fundamentally where the challenge went wrong was actually the selection of the envoy that actually went into Niger to interface with the militari junta. That was a fundamental gap.
Are you talking of the person of former Nigerian President Abdulsalam Abubakar?
Oh, yes, Abdulsalam Abubakar, former president, and then, of course, the Sultan of Sokoto. I think in circumstances, you probably would need a diplomat. You probably would be needing somebody who has some level of experience in international relations. You will be needing somebody who has actually been there. And of course, this is actually where the West African Elders Forum and their capability and capacity and professionalism comes in, and ably led by the former President Goodluck Jonathan. And I know that he has played a significant role in similar situations in Mali, in Burkina Faso. And I think that the choice of the envoy was a little bit of a situation because selection process and who was going to get in. And if you listen very carefully to the way they were treated, you will know very clearly that it was a case of moral compass, that the junta felt that those who came were those who, for one reason or the other in the past, had also been participants in similar instances, and they had also participated in coup d'etat in the past. So what moral compass do you then have to pull to be able to get us in this kind of situation? So that for me is actually a very big issue, which we did get right. And I think there's a need for us to renovate and then, of course, come back to deal with that issue properly. But again, is as the deadline draws near, I think you cannot throw away baby and its bathwater. What you can do is basically to find some kind of additional diplomatic channel that are open. Unfortunately, we have actually burnt bridges. We have been able to, unfortunately, use less diplomatic channels and communications and pressure. One of the things that might happen as deadline closes, rather than using a military option, is to further activate some additional sanctions that would help you to be able to get additional attention and see what are the potentials of other countries within the continent and what their disposition to the subject matter looks like. First of all, is the conversation around the institutional coup, which the previous speaker, I listened to him very carefully, had mentioned that ECOWAS over the years has remained quite lackluster in terms of how it becomes very deliberate with leaders who sit tight or those who were not popular and when regime didn't come to power. But I think what he also didn't mention or basically borders around legitimacy and the sovereignty of institutions and regimes within the ECOWAS community. So you cannot for any reason come and actually impede on situations that you perceive that some individuals had not met certain benchmarks around democratic infrastructure. And one thing that this tells us is that within the sub-region, there is this back pedal of a democratic infrastructure that is playing out as we speak. 6 countries, all bordering around the Sahel, are currently under military junta. And then, of course, that starts from Burkina Faso, Mali, you get to Guinea, and then, of course, Niger, and you go upward to Sudan, and you realize that there seems to be some level of change in the governance landscape. And why is this so? It is so because there's been some level of resentment, and over the years, citizens across the sub-region seem to have lost faith in the style of democracy that has been instituted. Yes, democracy is actually what everybody sought for, but I think the sub-region should have also adapted democratic norms to fit its own purposes and, of course, its own context. But if you look at every democratic country across West Africa, they operate a confused democratic system. It is either they have borrowed the British style or the French style, and then, of course, mix it up with some US kind of approach, and all of this confusing infrastructure and architecture seem to have thrown the entire system in turmoil. Now, people clamor for a return to military rule because they felt that political class and the political elites have entirely captured the society, and that it has become an avenue and conduit to consistently enrich a number of individuals. So that for me is fundamental. And the popularity of this regime amongst their stakeholders cause for a serious concern. It tells us very clearly that there must be a political review of our governance system and how the sub-region community institutions need to also sit down and do a reappraisal to understand that what exactly must have happened or gone wrong in terms of our institutions. Because what I can tell you now is that across the region and in countries that are in institutional coup, where people have taken over power for reasons where they are not legitimate to be there, some have actually been there for longer than when it is necessary. And of course, some have actually used some machineries of the state to be able to gain those accessibility. So if you put all of those things together, there seem to be less sanctions from ECOWAS itself. And what has happened, simply put, is that there seems to be some kind of a response from those junta to tell the ECOWAS community that you have actually slept on your rights for too long, and that now the people have actually taken the revolution a step further. And what we see is actually a revolution against bad governance. And this has resonated across all the countries that have experienced this unfortunate incidences in recent past. Now that this expiration date has actually come, ECOWAS should actually do two things. One, it should actually review and redeploy envoys with very influential capability and capacity. I can tell you, yes, I have great respect for the Sultan because of his very eminent personality, and of course, Salawa. But then these guys don't have those kind of experience in putting national pressure, and they don't have those kind of subtle ability to influence. And I think that was the step where we got it wrong.
Okay, thank you, Salahuddin. I would like also do. Yes. I'd like to bring in Ambassador Roy. I'd like him to have the last say on the program. Now, Ambassador Roy, Salahuddin did mention something. He did talk about, sanctions, more sanctions to the regime. But we've seen what sanctions have done in Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso. Do these sanctions work? And also, given the escalating tensions and the evolving landscape, what's your assessment of the potential implications for ECOWAS's role, long-term relevance, and its ability to effectively navigate complex security challenges within the dynamic West African sub-region?
Thank you very much. And I appreciate our guest from Abuja also. Now, let me tell you something, sir. ECOWAS, as a body, has its citizens in Niger. Nigerians have even done intermarriage, and they have bought land, they have titles, they are in Niger. And that same country that you see has ambassadors from other countries, including Nigeria. Have we looked at before your sanctions, have you looked at what number of citizens of your country are in that country? Have your ambassador given you a data to say we have vulnerable children in school, we have women doing business in the market, we have citizens that have investments that can be exposed? Have we taken stock of our citizen exposure that reside and are residents in that country? You see? So that's why I said that document needs to be reviewed, because right now the world is looking at human rights. Firstly. So what human rights component did we consider before we cut off electricity? As you said, you are cutting off electricity. Do you know how many Nigerians have businesses there that also send their investments back home to Nigeria? You block the borders. Have you known that Nigerians that were in school in Ukraine when the Russia and Ukraine issues blew up, so didn't we see how they suffered before they were able to be maneuvered from one point to the other, before some of them got to Nigeria? Even some airlines like Air Peace started to say, okay, we want to support. What support do we have for our brothers and our sisters there that we are throwing sanctions? You see? So I'm just looking at all these things. It's not looking like 2023. You know, to me, it's not looking like 2023.
Affects Nigerians and also other citizens of the ECOWAS sub-region. But unfortunately, this is where we have to come to the end of this discussion. And I say a big thank you to you, Ambassador Amin Roy Ohideve, the National Secretary of the Retired Members of Nigerian Armed Forces. He joined in from Lagos, and also security expert in Abuja, Salaudin Hashim. I do appreciate your insights and contribution to the subject. Thank you.